out on time.
Although I noticed they don't come as early as they used to.
No, they're not coming around at 6:30 or anything later. That's fine with me, but I keep telling my brother, I said, well, I usually wake up bright and early about 10 o'clock.
That's right, if not forever.
Back.
I
think we got.
I'm trying, I'm sure.
This morning I was up at 5 and went to the city's, dropped off motor and transmission back home at 10. So.
One thing that's really late now is the mail.
Huh?
The mail doesn't seem to come until 8 o'clock at night sometimes.
Well, it's goofy because I think we got a short one carrier, route carrier.
Yeah,
How do we get
And
that?
so then one route carrier does, a route and a half, and another one comes from Pine Island or something, finishes half a route. Okay, so it's
You know,
really goofy right now.
You know how to get that off of there? Joe, can you hear us?
Paul does.
They doing it now.
Oh, we're back to normal.
Is Joe gonna be on the screen tonight?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm hoping so.
There he is.
There he is.
Not sure how to,
Where's our?
can you see us, Joe?
Not yet.
Is our camera on?
blue lights on.
Yeah, the,
All I can see is the striped yellow, blue, green, pink, red. But that's okay.
Something about, she said you kind of have to do both. So if you go to that screen, that City of Orinoco screen,
yeah,
are we able to change that?
Well, what do we have as our source? I guess.
we can see you, Joe, and hear you.
Yeah, and I was hoping to be able to share my screen, honestly. Is that okay?
Go share it once.
Yeah, I think he'll be able to share.
Yeah, go ahead.
But
It
you're
says
not-
host disabled participant screen sharing, so there must be something on your side that you have to.
This green arrow screen share up in the middle of the screen there.
That's for us though. I think we gotta click on Joe and give him permission. Yeah, it's recording.
Okay.
Started.
Damn it.
Every input, whatever it is now.
I was just there in this, the week wrap. Last week. I just, we ran was on Saturday. Yep. So I was up there.
Council camera is that one. And then that should be the audience camera, right? Aiming at the audience.
Crazy when I was.
She said something about doing it up there and up here.
Yeah, I think we gotta give Joe permission. So on participants, I think you're gonna have to click Joe to get him to allow him to.
About the city of Orinoco host meeting.
Okay, Joe,
Click on-
let's start the meeting and then we'll make you the host. That sound okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Transfer.
Behind us. Just. Oh, down. Wait, camera.
Oh, sorry.
Joe and Jim, you want to get this? Thank you. Comes in. Minutes from last January. The January minutes, guys. Oh. It's Tuesday, February 14th, water and sewer meeting. So while we're figuring out, we'll go ahead and take care of a couple of things here first, before we bring Joe on.
You got this stuff. There you go. See?
And thank you, Joe, for joining us. Hope you're not feeling too bad.
Hanging in there.
All right. Joe's home with COVID this week, so appreciate his time. All right, I have a motion for the agenda.
A motion to approve the agenda.
Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. We have approval of January 10th meeting notes. You guys want a copy? Jim?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Okay. All right, Joe, we'll go ahead and have you take off on the contract one update.
Okay, can you see the screen that I'm sharing, I hope?
We see your agenda.
Okay, perfect. So I do have some other things that I'll pop up as we kind of go through this, but hopefully you can see the agenda. So first off, did you guys receive you all received the memo regarding the wastewater treatment facility? That's this memo that we put out
I think I attached that to the agenda that went out.
last week, right? So it basically just gives an update of the progress that's been made at the wastewater treatment plant, and progress continues at the treatment facility. Continues to be work in the pre-treatment building, the tertiary building, and the admin building, with different various pieces of equipment being installed, along with some of the plumbing and pumps and electrical, mechanical work. So that all continues to kind of move forward. The admin building is kind of taking shape, with all the framing on the interior being completed, as well as some of the sheetrock, and again, some of the various trades advancing that piece of the puzzle. The only part of the project that really has not been advanced over the last couple of months is the SBR, and that's just a function of the weather. There is some concrete pours that remain there, but we're really waiting for the contractors, waiting for better, warmer weather months coming here this spring to reinitiate that work. But all of the other components of the project kind of continue to move forward. There are some good pictures, good information within this memo. I assume that we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, given that we sent it out via email. Is there any questions or items specific to what the contractor is working on that you'd like me to talk about or touch on? Has anybody had the opportunity to be out at the treatment facility lately, by the way, too?
Nothing recently came, I guess. Yeah.
Kane, you've been out, I know Jeff mentioned.
Yep.
any specific items you think we should highlight or talk about in regards to the contractor's progress? I think that moving forward, they'll continue to push on the admin building. The exterior siding's supposed to start here in the next week or so. And then they might have even picked and installed the dome on the tank, on the north tank, sludge storage tank. Did they do that? I haven't been to work.
I don't think so,
No,
Joe.
it was on the ground.
I think they got rained out today.
I suppose that's probably true, and they need a pretty still day to do that. So hopefully, maybe tomorrow or Thursday they'll get that done. But they do continue to make pretty fair progress. The weather's been largely favorable, although most of the work is inside at this point. And they continue to make progress as equipment and materials kind of flow into the site. Staub does have a pay request. This is probably the smallest pay request that we've had in quite some time. It totals $394,986.25. That'll be set forth at the February 21st council meeting. The status of the gas and electric service to the wastewater treatment facility. We've talked about this in the past. And the big issue is really the gas. And I do have some more information on that. In regards to the electric utility, or the utilities being brought to the site, we have an allowance within the contract that provides the contractor with the ability to coordinate and pay the private utilities to extend utilities to the site. So electric's been extended to the site. That cost, based on what we know, it totals $13,664. The private utility allowance is $55,000. And the cost to extend communication to the site is $0. And so that leaves us basically $41,336 for the gas service. And we talked about the fact at the last meetings that the cost of the gas extension was very high. We did receive a firm estimate from Minnesota Energy. They're estimating the cost to extend the gas main from 100th Street, the wastewater treatment facility along Minnesota Avenue South, and then also extend the individual service to the into the site. That total cost is $67,825. And so the difference between the gas cost plus the electric cost minus the $55,000 is about $26,500 that we are above the allowance amount. So we do have the ability to, issue a change order and increase the contract amount by, $26,500 and have them move forward with that gas service. That additional money comes out of, our contingency, which, is essentially a loan that funds the site. And we've also talked about the potential for converting to propane for use at the wastewater treatment plant until the gas company extends the gas utility to the site for another reason. And we kind of touched on that too, with the fact that the gas company's method of operation is that, essentially the gas gets extended to the first user. We're not a very significant user, and so the first user essentially pays the cost to extend the main. In this case, again, that cost is about $67,000. I've had some correspondence also with Ron Cox and Orinoco Estates. And Orinoco Estates is working with Matthew to purchase a pretty significant chunk of property immediately south of the wastewater treatment plant. And they're proposing to expand the mobile home community fairly extensively. And they had planned to be under construction this fall, and they would be able to start offering lots, late this year or next year. And at this point, they've had run into some roadblocks with their acquisition with associated with Matthew, and so that's caused some delays on their part, but they're still optimistic by over the next month or two that they'll work through the purchase agreement and acquire the land, and then they'll go through a permitting process and complete the design of their facilities and start construction yet this fall. So the reason I bring all that up is if they indeed move forward with a significant development, then the gas company would probably at their cost bring the utility to them, because they'd be a much more significant user with lots more individual lots to serve than just the wastewater treatment facility. So that would essentially change the equation fairly significantly for Orinoco. But the problem is we don't have the luxury of just sitting and waiting for them. So I think that it's important that we simply wait a little bit, till this spring and see what happens to Matthew, or with the agreement between Matthew and Orinoco Estates, and see if indeed that development looks like it's going to move forward, and then at that point make some decisions as to or have some more conversations with the gas company at that point, and then be able to make some more informed decisions. But based on the evaluation that we've kind of completed, the cost to convert to propane is a bit more significant than we were really thinking initially. You can see I'm sharing some correspondence from our mechanical engineer, and kind of his bottom line is that he estimates the cost to convert all the equipment and piping to propane is somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000. And then of course, at some point we'd have to convert back to gas and then pay to have gas extended from the street into the site. And with all of those considerations, I'm less inclined to ultimately recommend that. I think
What's the reason for waiting on Matthew and Orinoco Estates?
I think that there's still a chance that if we can demonstrate that Orinoco Estates is moving forward with a significant development, we can make the argument to the gas company that you do indeed have another significant user here. And given that, there's a potential that they will cover more of the main extension costs rather than make Orinoco pay for 100% of it, or at the very least, we could split the cost with Orinoco Estates and decrease some of the initial capital costs.
Have they budgeted for that in their cost estimates?
I don't know what Orinoco Estates is budgeted for. I think that they're assuming that gas will be extended to them at no cost because they would be a more significant user.
Joe, is there any indications if, with the Orinoco Estates expansion, if the gas would come from 85th Street for them or from 100th Street?
The information that Minnesota Energy has provided to me is they are not interested in extending gas main from the south to the wastewater treatment plant, their preferred route is along Minnesota Avenue from Hunter Street. And so I'm assuming that if that's the case for the wastewater treatment plant, it's the same scenario for Orinoco Estates.
Joe, was that the other route that we had brought up last time? Cause didn't you guys bring up like, couldn't there be gas from the there? So that route does not exist, or they're not interested in it?
The route exists. It's the same route that People's Cooperative Electric is taking, and I provided all that information to Minnesota Energy, and they said after they looked at it, they're not interested in putting in a gas main through that field, whether there is or isn't an easement there. They think there's too much risk and it's too difficult for them to maintain, so they're not interested in that option at all.
One more question. If Orinoco Estates, or if they actually do expand, would they just pay the difference, the 26.5 that we're over, or would the whole thing get redistributed based on usage?
I think that the whole thing would get recalculated. So there would be a different cost benefit calculation that the gas company would do for the extension of that main. And there's some potential that, all of that, a good chunk of that $67,000 to get the gas main to the treatment facility would be covered by the utility, because their cost benefit would increase because they would have so many more users. But unfortunately, the timing isn't great. The reality is that with the Orinoco Estates delay in development, it's not likely that they'll be, having any users come online till at earliest 2024, and we really need gas service in 2023.
When is our drop dead gate that you need the gas? Like, we actually have to hook stuff up and start doing stuff. I'm sure it's before July.
Well, yeah, I would think that.
You won't get a certificate of occupancy until you've got hot water, I would guess.
Right.
It's
So,
gonna be probably discussed in our next item on the agenda too.
Yeah.
I was just
So-
curious how long we can wait.
Mid to late summer. This stuff doesn't happen overnight either. So, to plow a mile of gas main in and get this done, I mean, it's going to take months to get that in the queue and done. So I think we have reasonably till spring to continue to gather some data and make some better arguments with the gas company, but it's at that point, we're gonna have to make a decision as to whether to go with gas or go with propane. And based on the information that, I'm being kind of told, where it's $25,000 to $30,000 to convert to propane, and then you got the cost to convert back to gas at some point, and then you still got to extend gas from the street into the facility. There's not as much savings as I was hoping to see there. And the gas company, of course, did kind of back down from, the $100,000 that they were originally talking about.
Well, the gas company has to put in a bigger line than what's at Orinoco Estates now, because they're getting gas in over there now, what they got.
Yeah, the gas from to Orinoco Estates kind of comes off of 85th Street, and they're not interested in extending that to the treatment facility for reasons that I'm not privy to.
have they, so that $67,000, have they indicated what percentage of the actual cost that is? I mean, are we bearing 90% or 50%?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Is there any chance that in the future, as new customers come on, we can say, we paid for that line? If you people want to tap into it, you pay us.
Well, 'cause they-
Unfortunately not. I've explored that option too and asked the same questions you guys are, and I've I've been told no. And I've made the case that what they're kind of doing isn't fair, isn't equitable, doesn't make sense. And that's how they do it, is pretty much what I'm being told.
Let's go on to the next item, Joe, and
So yeah, the next item is one of the more critical items for the meeting tonight. And so at last week's monthly construction coordination meeting with Staub, the electrical contractor informed us that the motor control centers for the treatment facility, along with some of the switchboard and electrical control panel components, wouldn't likely be delivered to the treatment facility until mid-July. And this is different than what we'd been hearing in the past. And once the equipment gets delivered, we've got 2 to 3 months of installation work before we can really start up the facility. And so this is obviously important to the project from the standpoint of, we originally planned on July 8th to start treating low flow wastewater from basically the grinder pumps. So the grinder pump installations per the contract are supposed to start, around the 4th of July, and then we'd start to receive small volumes of wastewater that we'd be able to start treating at the wastewater treatment facility. And that process is in danger at this point, because if we don't have the MCC stuff and the other related electrical components until mid-July, and then they're not installed until, late September, sometime in October, that means we don't start operating the facility till that point for low flow, high flow, anything. And so that impacts when we can start the grinder station connections. And so that revelation was a pretty big deal at last week's meeting. And so at this point, we've got some things to explore in terms of how that impacts the project, specifically the grinder station startup. We could still meet substantial completion for the project if things go as planned, which is essentially scheduled for, I think it's October 30th at this point. But it obviously impacts, what it impacts the most in my mind is the grinder stations and how and when they can come online. So we need to work through that, but that's the piece of information that we have at this point.
the gentleman that made the comments from the subcontractor indicated that there's nothing, we asked various questions at the meeting about what the city could do, leverage. And he said the only thing, if you're a post office or a federal government, you might get some leverage with the company. It's Allen Bradley, I think it is. Either in Wisconsin or part of it is in Wisconsin. So we're just at the mercy of hopefully getting it before July. But it's just a month by month basis as far as getting any different in a time frame. So
right. From what I'm
When they place that order, Joe?
I don't know exactly when they placed it. We've been talking about this specific item for, well, since really the start of the project, because I think everybody knew that this is one of the items that has been a chronic issue for projects, and the electrical contractor listed a dozen projects that, or half dozen projects that, basically says every project is the same. They're all behind schedule, and some of that's gotten better, but
Joe, can we play the card that, I mean, this is a predominantly state-funded, government-funded project. And it is a patient safety concern. It's one of the reasons why we have to put this in. Can't we play that card or angle to get higher on the Allen Bradley queue? And the only reason I say that is that, sometimes that safety in public, and like healthcare and other stuff, I can use that to get supplies over others, right?
Mhm.
So do we have any leverage there? At least jump queue maybe a month, over somebody else that's using it for,
For-profit industry.
right, exactly. This is for public safety and,
We could talk about that a little bit or explore that option. There's a lot of cities obviously doing wastewater work.
these controllers are used for other things, right? Because they're just.
I'm
controlling
sure.
a bunch of motors, yes, that's where I was like, if we can just convey what it's for.
Right. Right.
There's a reason, we're not just ordering this for fun.
Right.
And Staub's response was pretty much along the same lines as the subcontractor too, is that just the projects they have in place, other projects that Staub has are experiencing the same kind of delays, and it's kind of an industry known fact, I guess, so I don't know. It's worth a discussion at our next meeting, but
Don't we have legislators in high places?
They're in Wisconsin. The company's in Wisconsin and our legislators are in Minnesota, so.
We have,
We have
representatives.
restaurants between Wisconsin and Minnesota. Stuff.
Joe, if this delay pushes other parts of the project back, do we have any provisions for liquidated damages or failure to meet goals or anything like that the contractor is gonna be pushed up against? Any financial impact other than?
Well, within the contract documents, there are stipulations for applying liquidated damages when milestone completion dates, substantial completion date, final completion dates aren't met. And so there is that potential, but in this instance, when there's been so much delay, I'm not sure how successful we're gonna be pushing that. I mean, we can talk about that.
I'm only concerned if the electrical contractor dropped the ball and they just ordered this stuff 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Then that to me is negligent on their part, but,
Mhm.
industry.
I don't think that's the case. I know that, the shop drawings have been, reviewed and I don't think things were just ordered. I don't think it's that at all. In fact, we've been talking about this specific issue, the electrical components and these impacting lots of different projects and these delays happening. And we had thought maybe that was things were coming back online a little faster, and the electrical contractor says they are. He's got projects that are farther behind than what we will be. The other thing should be noted is they don't guarantee July delivery date either. So from that perspective, you're kind of at their mercy. Are there things that we could look at or pursue? Sure. But I think these are more of kind of the supply chain and chip shortages and those impacts that we've kind of all dealt with for the last couple of years.
Where's the electrical contractor from?
Minneapolis.
Are they? I didn't even know.
Kilmer's out of Minneapolis.
Yeah. They seem to be very competent and know what they're doing, and they do a lot of work. I'm not overly familiar with them myself.
We did talk about the tertiary building, I think it is. About doing some pre-wiring. They really don't want to do that either because it's such a spaghetti bowl. And they don't want to have to redo stuff. They could run wires, but then they run the chance of.
If there's nowhere to land it, or then wherever you land it moves, then you gotta redo it.
Exactly. So there is some preliminary work they could do, but the real difficult, time-consuming stuff, they really needed to wait until they get the panels.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that they'll do as much as they can do in preparation for the installation as soon as the equipment comes in. At least that's our expectation. But I think again, this is an item that we're gonna have to give it a month or two and see what the latest projections are and make some decisions from there.
I would recommend, Joe, that you would reach out to Alan Bradley directly, because as an electrical contractor, they're just one of many going in after these things. But until you talk directly to these companies, this is what I do as part of my supply chain management with healthcare. And when I talk to the CEOs of the companies, I'm saying this is for patient care, this is for health, then I can get stuff expedited. Otherwise, they're just another electrical contractor with one of many panel orders that this company has, right? But they
Sure.
don't know what it's for. So I actually think it's worthwhile to get a hold of them and see, because especially since you said the July date's not guaranteed. And so that means we could get pushed out further. And then you said it's 2 to 3 months to install it once it's here. So you're already potentially September, October, right?
Yeah.
And if we get pushed further, right?
That moves all of our,
All revenue, all everything. And we're still paying on, I mean, that's bad.
we got the assessments coming in, but that's it.
It's
But no
not-
expenses either. So.
Right.
I think it's worthwhile to contact them. It's a simple call. They can say no. And then at
Right.
some point, if we can get legislators involved or something, if need be, it's a call, right?
Yeah.
It's a phone call.
Well, I'm willing to do that. I've not done that, or I haven't heard that being done, but I think that's a legitimate point, Paul, and I'll do that. Like you said, it's just a call or a few calls. If we can get somebody's attention, maybe it can do some good.
Get a sympathetic ear.
Right.
And really, there's, at least for the motor control centers, there's the actual frame, and then there's all the buckets that go in it. You don't need 100% on day one. You need the frame, and you need half your buckets to get your equipment running. It wouldn't be ideal, but at least if you had the frame, then the electrical contractor could start running their pipe.
And to Ryland's point about the assessments, remember the prepaid assessments have to go straight to PFA, so they have no impact for us. And then from the, property taxes, we get the payments, July, December, and snippet in January. So.
Okay, well, Joe, I think that's, give that some thought, and we need some work with Jason and Staub to get a contact, I guess. All they can do is try.
right.
It's better than
Well,
nothing.
right, I agree. I'll take that on and try to find the right person to make the case. Like we all said, it's worth some effort. So
Okay.
I'm willing to do that. Now, obviously, I guess we'll get to it down below, but this would technically theoretically impact our startup too. So we've kind of been talking about the process of securing an operator and when that operator would want to come online. I guess the good side is those operation costs are pushed back just a little bit too. But I think, the larger thing is really figuring out how and what to do with those grinder stations. The contractor had indicated that Ellingson had indicated that they were interested in coming into Orinoco and starting that work actually early, and directional drilling force mains and installing grinder stations and just not tying them over until July. But there's no point, I don't think, in doing that until we have some more certainty in when we can actually start treating things. I don't want to come in and tear people's yards up and not be able to provide the final connections and treatment in a reasonable time frame. So I think that's another thing that we've got to consider.
Before we get into the Fitzgerald and laterals, so the biosolid loadout configuration changes, do you want to touch base?
Oh,
Wait,
yeah, absolutely do.
okay, thanks.
So what's specified in the construction plans is basically this. So are you guys, you can see this biosolid loadout. And so this is a configuration that we're proposing, and what's specified in the construction plans isn't the top load feature. It's basically this vacuum load connection, and it stops here. And based on the information that I think, it's more likely that you're going to have a top load scenario for biosolid haulers at this site. And so I think that providing this additional piping and valving and structure with this facilities probably makes sense. And so I guess we put this detail together, and I'd seek additional cost information from the contractor to add this top load biosolid feature to the treatment facility. So essentially this is the facility, and this is the additional piping that the biosolid spreader or tank essentially would drive under this and get loaded out rather than connecting to this. So it will really give you two options to load biosolid out of the treatment facility. And based on some correspondence with area haulers, it seems like that might be a better scenario to provide that additional flexibility.
Is that something they're gonna get back with us in March for that cost?
Yeah, I put this together, or not the wastewater folks put this together, and I did send this over to Staub and ask them for pricing. And now that I have the detail put together, I just wanted to get it in front of the committee, let you know that we're proposing this change and kind of why we're proposing this change. And again, it's a more likely scenario that your biosolid to be loaded out. It provides you a little bit more flexibility from which to work moving forward. Frankly, it probably should have, been bid out this way originally. I think it's just a detail that was overlooked and during the original bidding, we just provided that vacuum loadout connection rather than the top load connection as well. And I just don't think you'll be happy with that long term. So I think we need to look at this option.
Do those tend to be rigid like that, or do they swing out of the way or swing into place or fixed?
I think it's rigid.
Joe, you probably wanna add I don't know where the nearest water supply would be, but you probably wanna add a flushing line.
Yeah, There
above-
is already a flushing line. There's a yard hydrant right next to this.
Okay, and there's a spot to connect it to flush that vertical riser and horizontal pipe out.
There is not, but there is a valve here that can be opened and then it drains into the manhole that flows back to the lift station.
Yeah, usually what happens though is you load your sludge out, you shut the pump off, you shut the valve, but that horizontal line up there is still full of sludge and it'll just run out for 15 minutes. Depending on how thick it is.
So this 12-foot by
Yeah.
6-foot pipe.
So usually at the end of the filling of the truck, you'd run some clear water through it to flush the solids through.
Okay. I haven't seen that before, but
And then that would help also. I mean, there's a hydrant nearby, but when you do drain that below grade piping, you'll want to flush some clean water down through that drain line too, so the solids don't just sit in that pipe.
sure. And where do they put this flushing connection?
I would put it right above that T, so you get the T, the plug valve, and then I'd put it right above that so that you can close the plug valve on the main line and then force the flushing water up and out.
But then how would that go? I suppose you'd open the valve and it'd go down then too.
You know,
Okay. So that's like a corp into that pipe essentially.
yeah,
And then you can
Or a saddle.
connect that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, corp like just a valve drilled into the
yeah.
side of the pipe. Although that extends into the pipe and yeah.
Yeah, I'd put just I mean, depending on what kind of pipe it is, either just a weldolet or a tapping saddle. If it's steel
Yeah.
pipe, just weld it on there.
Yeah, I think it's ductile pipe.
Yeah, then I'd put a tapping saddle and drill it out.
Okay, well, I'll make a note to add a valve there or add a corp, like a 1-inch corp. 1-inch valve connection.
What's 6-inch pipe? If the yard hydrant's what size is the yard hydrant? 1.5 inch, 2-inch?
Yeah, I think it's inch and a half.
I'd try to match that.
Okay. That's easy enough to do. So, more information will come forward on this. When we get the pricing information, we'll incorporate that into a change order unless there's some concern about this addition. I do think you want this.
Oh, I think so too. I think that's. I think you want to clean out them. Those loading out, that can happen in the winter time too.
The biosolid loadout stuff, typically not in the winter, I don't think. Typically a spring fall type deal.
Yeah. The only time.
And then all this is of course land applied. That's the controlling feature, and then it has to be worked into the ground.
So if you had to get rid of some in the winter, you'd have to truck it to a bigger plant to dump it. Cost money.
All right, let's jump to Fitzgerald.
So Fitzgerald. You guys should have all received the project status update number 18. That was sent out not the 17th, but last Friday, which was, I guess, the 10th. Contractor is making good progress on the utility piping in the green areas. A fair amount of force mains gotten installed along Minnesota Avenue, along Cedar Point Road, and in some of the green areas, green spaces. Contractors also making good progress on lift station number 4. I think they got that structure set late last week and continue to move that forward. So you can kind of see that the contractors made some progress by the size of the pay request. They've got a pay request totaling $767,382, which is a pretty good pay request for construction that's being done in January and February. They really have had favorable weather for the most part, and they've gotten quite a bit of work done. They've had 3 to 4 crews working, and made good progress on lift station 3 and the work in Riverwood Hills Park, as well as, again, the 3 or 4 other green spaces, and then the force main work along Minnesota Avenue to the wastewater treatment plant from the big lift station, as well as lift station 4. So the contractor is making pretty good progress, and I'm pleased with that. They pretty much done what they had thought they would be able to do, and then a little bit more. So
I see on Minnesota Avenue, they had to put the hammer on coming down the hill a bit from the north of Gas and Go today. Was it today, this morning, yesterday? Okay, so.
We're up for this morning,
That
beating away on.
wasn't, I thought it was. But anyway, they're making great progress on Minnesota.
Yeah, that's went in fairly quickly. They did blast along a good chunk of that route. That really expedites the process, as you can tell. That's about a half mile of pipe.
So I got a question regarding, they've been putting a lot of pipe in the ground. So when do they go back and do, I guess, is it air testing then? For leaks?
Yeah, the
Or,
gravity pipe are air tested. And then the force mains and water mains are pressure tested with water. And so, they'll do that when all the connections are complete. So that's something that Joe had talked about starting this next spring with some of these force main runs and whatnot.
and so that would be for the stuff that was done last over West Center Street and First Street and everything.
Right. Everything that hasn't been tested to date would be tested.
Change order number 2.
Yep. So
Not oversight.
we did prepare change order number 2 for the wastewater, or the contracts 2 and 3. And this change order really has to do with the bituminous base that was placed. We require that the contractor cut cores at random locations based on the tonnage that's placed, and the tonnage is broken into lots, and we run cores, and 3 of those lots had densities that weren't well, basically MnDOT's got a schedule where you look at the densities and they're not 100% payment. They're like 99 or 98% payment. And so, and that's because the densities are lower than the required densities. We don't pay density incentives, but we do, we did incorporate density disincentives, I guess, into the contract. And so the contractor did have some areas where you know, the density is substandard, and so based on the MnDOT construction specifications, these areas qualify for a deduct. And that deduct in payment for the bituminous base is $7,368.55. And so we put this change order together to deduct a portion of the payment of the bituminous base to the contractor. And mind you, this is a less than 1% of a deduct of the total bituminous base cost. But nonetheless, there's a protocol that MnDOT sets up that we typically follow. And so we're just kind of following through with that. So that's what this change order does. And this is the spreadsheet that has been developed to calculate the deduct.
So when they put the second lift on, do they make up that difference then in those areas?
It's not that you can make up the difference. It's basically the density that the bituminous has been compacted to. And so, you know, for example, instead of 92%, it's 91.2% in this lot 2.
Oh, okay.
And so then that creates a $920 deduct. And so that's how that calculation's made. And you kind of go through all 7 lots and do that. None of the densities were in an area where, you know, it would require removal or doing anything but taking this deduct in payment based on MnDOT's specification and criteria for the evaluation. So that's really kind of what we have here.
So no safety concerns or truck load limits or
No.
things that will
No.
long-term have issues.
Will break down sooner.
Well, the density isn't what we'd like it to be. So, you know, there is a long-term performance impact. Is that significant? Not terribly, but that's reflected in the size of the deduct that is offered. If it was significant, you know, the construction specifications would require the contractor to remove it. You know, there's really no way to get more density in the pavement once it's cooled. And so that's a constructability issue that's on the contractor, and that's in this case Rochester Sand and Gravel.
So in general, is there a warranty, for lack of different words, to explain the paving that they're doing? A year from now, if there's any defects, or 2 years, or was there a time period?
Well, your whole project has a 2-year warranty from substantial completion. So all of the components, whether it's a pipe or a pavement, are subject to that warranty.
Chances are that won't show up any defects in 2 years.
No.
Okay.
And we do have a wearing course to go over this. I really, you know, I would always rather not see any issues with density or have a deduct on any pavement, but I don't know that this is all that significant or worrisome.
I don't think that little bit is gonna bother any.
Yeah, so in your experience, it's just a minimal type.
It really is. We're just doing what we need to do based on the data here. It happens.
Okay, let's go to miscellaneous update reviews. Conversations that we've had with the Olmsted County soil
Yes,
conservation.
so we did have a few good conversations with different folks and in regards to the private sewer and water service connections. And in our first meeting, we met with the SWCD about the potential for them to secure some grant funding to help seal wells. And they do have an existing program that people could apply for and receive up to 50% matching grant funds up to a maximum of $1,400 to abandon a well. It's unclear if the SWCD has enough money in the pot to fund all the the 90 or so property owners that would come in and request grant funds to abandon their well, and they're working to secure funding for this program or to support this program through the health department or maybe Bowser or a few other avenues. We had a meeting with them earlier this month, and we're gonna meet with them in a bit here, what I think towards the end of the month, again to evaluate where they are with this program and what funding has come through or hasn't come through. But I thought it was a real positive sign that they do have an existing program and that folks would qualify for up to 50% of the costs. It's not 100% of the cost, but it's certainly helpful. And
Yeah.
the second, go ahead. Did you guys?
I was just gonna say, I agree. It was a very positive conversation and it sounded like, yeah, we'll go see if we could find some money, so.
Yep. So that's one positive development. And the other positive development I felt was our meeting with the HRA, Olmsted HRA. They do have a existing program that could be used to finance sewer and water connection costs for property owners. And their criteria is incomes at 80% of the Olmsted County median household income. And those incomes are fairly significant. And so if they qualify, and I did write a few of these down. I just wanted to let you guys know. So for example, for a 2-person household, the 80% of the median income is $71,400. For a 4-person household, it's $89,200. For a 1-person household, 80% of the median income is $62,450. So Olmsted County has a fairly high median income compared to other parts of the state, and so that helps in this instance. And I think that we might have a decent number of people qualify for this program, and the program essentially is a loan at 2% interest rate and no payments until the parcel is sold or a maximum of 15 years go by. So the HRA is working to kind of tailor this program to us and is working to provide more information, but I thought this was a positive development that has a lot of promise to help people.
Will that include removal or whatever other costs are associated with septic tanks?
I believe so.
And is there how much money does that organization have? Because those are, I mean, that could be a lot of money. A lot of people asking for loans.
it could be, I don't know specifically, Sunny, or Ryland, do you remember that part of the discussion? Or any details on that part of the discussion that we had?
I don't.
Oh, I recall that, they're, they kind of, it would be part of their operating costs, because they already have this program kind of in place. So they would utilize kind of the basic foundation of what they have in place, and that, they have a significant pot of money because it's through a levy from the county. But then they could also have their own governing board that could pull from reserves a little bit or whatever, so.
I
So
have a
there's-
feeling that we might put a demand on that pot of money that's larger than they're used to.
But I can tell you, they were the ones I thought that were, I'm gonna say, more enthusiastic than, I mean, we approached enthusiastic, but the response I thought was,
Very good. Mark Pine was on, the commissioner was on the call too. He made it sound like, well, we'll just ask for the money and seek for the money and find out what that number is and go for it.
right.
Obtain it, so.
And we don't anticipate that they're all going to come at once either, right? So you, as your fiscal years change, that can kind of be a rolling thing too.
That'd be something where we'd wanna figure out how much money they have available per year. And depending on how many residents we think would qualify for that before, we talked about what kind of time frame for connections, right? That'd be the kind of thing where you'd wanna make sure that you don't force everybody to connect on the front end. But the county's only got a certain amount of money and 2/3 of the people that apply are eligible, but they don't get money because they don't have it. That kind of coordination.
There's two really positive things. One is it's all between the homeowner and the contractor and the county. City does not have any involvement. There's no administrative charges. Sonny's doing cartwheels during the meeting.
Yeah,
So it's all, the owner works with the contractor bills no. The
It's a
contractor goes to the county or the
reimbursement.
homeowner goes to the county and the county reimburses the contractor. So it's all separate between the homeowner, contractor and the county. So it's really hands off. And,
And I know,
that was a main
rural
one.
development also has a program that again would be between the homeowner directly and them, and that's a 1% loan. So we have some options, but one, I mean, we were really excited to start getting some local involvement, with the HRA. That was a big piece. And these other parties that are interested, that's always a good thing too.
Yeah, that's good.
And being able to go back to the residents and say, we have some options for you.
So the other point I was gonna make is that, and I believe this was adjusted gross income or gross income.
Gross income.
So back in 2019, 2020, for some people that were on the committee back then, we did income surveys for the downtown area. And from what I remember, Joe, I think it was in that $60,000 to $65,000 range. Or,
I think it might even been lower than that. I thought it was like 55, 60,000.
maybe it's 55 and we were hoping for something less because even at 55, it didn't give us, at least when we were looking at where, from a PFA perspective, it didn't really help us, I guess, but
Well,
I think you're right. I think it was closer to 55,000.
and that's the difference too between your full gross and then versus an 80% AMI
Yes,
that they're looking at too. So,
20% higher, yeah.
yeah,
So hopefully there'll be some people that will qualify for this program and that they'll get good use of it. It was
All right,
I got one more question on that financing thing. So along with your question about hitting people up all at the same time. Is this a program that's funded every year? It's a different pot to work out of? So you either want to be first in line or else you wait until next year or you won't get the money?
well, you have to, and that's a good question,
You gotta be lined up with the contractor who's gonna do it.
gotta find contractors, and I think that's,
Some of that won't happen till a week before you do it.
that gets into our. I don't want to deviate from the agenda very much, but I was just FYI, I was looking at our ordinances today. And we have a 12-month ordinance for in our sewer connections, we say 12 months. Which is in section 51:021. But in section 51 or code 51:020. Residents connect to a city water system, we don't have a time period in the ordinance. For any of our new connections. Which is. An oversight maybe on. Putting something in there for new hookups. Back when 2009 and 10 was installed, it was 5 years. But unless I missed something in the ordinance, I did just a quick. Curfew, I just kind of. Did a control find for water hookups and connections, and that's the only place I could see that it was talking about. Any type of time period was in the sewer, but nothing in the water section, so. But I
We
think
should
that's-
double check that because that's an important point if that's
Yeah,
the case.
that's. Is there? It needs to be reviewed and attention drawn to that because in a couple months, people are going to start hooking up. April, May, good weather.
Right.
Water meters provided, you got water meters.
Not yet, they're on,
Back order.
I've got 9. I've got 9.
When are they scheduled to come in, Kane?
So the ones we ordered back in October still haven't arrived. And so talking with the meter company and our metering representative. They say if you need meters to order now, no matter what. Order in, so.
Would it be? For anybody that wants to hook up? Could you hook them up and just have a base charge of 2 units or something like that? And I don't know how you do that ordinance wise, but at least. Not make them wait to do their work because we don't have a meter. Most of them you can get at least a stub set, right, where it's just a.
We have the actual brass meter, we don't have the endpoint,
Electronics.
the electronics.
Yeah,
So that's the whole key component, but if somebody needs to get hooked up and the city wants to allow that. A flat fee. That's something that could be explored. If somebody's well is on,
Emergency situation.
yeah, if somebody's well, just. Took a dive and they can hook up and.
Right.
there's, I don't know if it's an issue here, but in Rochester, for example, there's a minimum charge. Of, I think the number 6 units, 100 cubic feet for snowbirds, right? Because they leave, they don't have any water use at all in December, January, February. But they still have to pay a bill based on 6 units for the rest of the year, so.
And how many meters are on order that you're waiting for? Or
We've
units?
got 60 on order that we're waiting for, and then at the February council meeting, I've got a quote for the remainder 60. We needed a total of 129.
Okay.
I've got the 9, and now, like I said, we're waiting on the first 60. February council meeting, you're gonna be able to approve the next 60.
Good, all right. Didn't mean to deviate from the agenda, but that's an important issue, so. All right, so if we got a good response from HRA and also from the soil conservation, so it was a very productive meeting, and I sense. And like Sonny said, it's just great to have that local participation. That just it takes everything else off the table, so.
One other thing I forgot to mention too is the USDA, our rural development has grants also if you meet some criteria, which is senior.
Sure.
So in addition to the 1% loan piece, there's some grant dollars available as well. And again, that is all between the property owner and
Directly.
Yep.
Administrative.
So do we, if folks call here, do we have a point of contact that we can say, oh, you need to call this other person at the county?
and we're putting all the pieces together
Okay.
so that we know kind of,
Who to
Yeah.
send where?
much like the contractor list that we're developing, you know, these are the people that you might want to contact for. Giving you, so,
Good.
so providing as much information as we possibly can, that's the goal.
Thank you. It might also be worthwhile at some point having those folks come out and do kind of a
Yes.
informational, here's what you need to do.
Yep.
If you need help filling out the paperwork, be in the back, you know.
Yes,
And that could be a part of our public information meeting that Joe want to do early this year sometime too.
Right.
Let's go to the
Yep.
real property declaration.
And more progress to kind of report here. We've, I think, worked through the process with MMB for the real property declaration for the 19 city-owned properties that needs to be recorded. The 19 properties are parcels that the city owns that are being impacted directly by sewer, water, or wastewater improvements. And as a function of that, there has to be a declaration placed on those parcels that, you know, the city's not going to sell them, and that, you know, state funding was used to construct the improvements impacting the property. We do have 3 of those 19 parcels that we talked to MMB about. One is the large parcel in River Park, and MMB has allowed us to prepare a legal description to only encumber the portion of the property that is being impacted by the wastewater improvements. So for example, there's 100 by 100 segment of that River Park parcel, that, you know, very western corner, if you will, by lift station 1 that's encumbered. The rest of the parcel is free from that real property declaration. So that allows the city to do some things or sell that property in the future without that encumbrance. So we've got just a few things to work through on that, and those will be recorded along with all of the utility easements and low pressure agreements. And we'll be able to put that piece behind us, which is a good step.
so remind me how many people opted not to sign?
2.
Okay.
2 out of the 84. So.
All right, any other comments for Joe on that? All right, let's go on to the next item, C, our 1-year time frame discussion we've had the last couple meetings. So we
So
talked
go ahead.
about, go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, we've talked about these options for utility connection and how to deal with the potential that those connections might be a hardship on some folks, and different options to kind of deal with that. And so I went through and tried to concisely summarize those 2 options within item C1 there. And wanted to see if we wanted to talk about it a little bit more. We never really did come to a conclusion. One is to extend the duration of for hooking up to the sanitary sewer and water municipal systems from 12 to 24 months. essentially from October 2024 to September 2025, which covers 2 construction seasons, or consider deferment of the hookup requirement for citizens who would suffer a financial hardship due to the cost of the hookup. They would essentially apply for a deferment, and that deferment would be evaluated based on criteria similar to what we use to evaluate the assessment deferment applications that we previously used.
I'll just throw a comment out from a discussion, but based on what we saw from or listened to in our conversation from Olmsted HRA and Soil Water Conservation District, I think there's still some good options at those low interest rates and no payments until partial sale or the 15-year max term, depending on which one they choose, I guess.
I do agree. I think that does change the
number two, I
calculation a
guess.
bit.
And is that 100% of the cost? That loan is eligible up to 100% of the contractor's cost? Based on what we know?
Based on what we know.
That's- It's almost too good to believe, but yeah.
I think that really does address my concerns that, this would be a really significant hardship for folks. I still think we'd want to coordinate to make sure we don't overwhelm the system, overwhelm what the county is capable of providing, and just make sure that our time frame allows for enough money to circulate through the system to cover the need. But I think it kind of, if it's as good as it seems to be, then you wouldn't need an indefinite deferment.
And they are aware of the numbers. We talked about the 210, 220 sewer. And then the water too. So they're aware of those numbers. I think they recognize, at least that was one of the takeaways. I was so positive that they said, we'll get the funding, or we'll find the funding, but I think what would help that situation would be to look at this 2-year, 24 months. And now it's really potentially even moving out further based on what we heard last week, but I do think it's the one construction season is really 7 months, 8 months of actual being able to do anything.
Right.
For the most part, we've had an exceptionally nice winter, but that's not every year either. So the construction season, all of a sudden, 12 months now, it's only April to October, November. I guess I recognize the lack of users for the rates, but at the same time, not to repeat myself from the previous meetings, but I think there are people that are anxiously waiting to hook up. And yes, there will be the outliers, but I could be totally wrong, but I think it's totally I think if we go from 12 to 24 months, and when we have our information meeting of supplying information that Joe's pulling together for all these loans that we're potentially talking about and having available to share with them, and the contractor and the electricians list for the hooking of the low pressure grinders up, I think it's I think we're gonna need 2 seasons to make that happen for everybody, for all 200 units. And of those 220 units, 120 of them are getting water. Other comments? That's where I'm coming from.
Think seriously about extending it to the 24. Because there's just gonna be too much stuff, trying to get it all done in 7 months, it's not gonna happen.
If I may comment, I want to check the code and see those dates and stuff. because you're saying you saw discrepancies for sewer versus water,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
So that's on my list now to
Yeah,
investigate.
please do. First read.
But depending on the outcome of that, one of the things that I might suggest is that if people are going through the steps to obtain some financial assistance via options that we're gonna provide them, then I think that's justification for allowing some leeway in extending. But if they're just saying no, then I don't know that an extension maybe is appropriate. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of that pushback thing, because it is in the ordinance, whatever it is, we'll determine what that is and certainly provide. But I think overall, based on what you're seeing in terms of 2 out of the 84 were the ones that just said no, okay, well, then you be on your own. But if we have people who there is some financial hardship, and it, to the extent that we can help them out and they're making headway toward that, I can see certainly allowing some adjustment based on that good faith effort on their part, meeting kind of halfway. So maybe that's just something that we need to get the facts in place and bring it back to the.
The other thing, and I guess I'm not sure exactly how we play that out without having a definite date starting now or whenever we decide if we're gonna change it. Because if we don't change it, then we're having to deal with these individual cases of hardship within that first year, unless we decide, okay, we're gonna have to set some guidelines up that everybody can follow, or I'm afraid it's gonna be a lot of administrative work to take care of those situations too.
Well, and it's all predicated on when they get hooked up, right? So that's when the clock really ticks for them. In terms of, even for us, in terms of enforcing an ordinance, so that becomes a staggered, to a certain extent, a little bit of staggering in that process as well. Hopefully to encompass, a rolling pot of money.
Yeah, I think that 24 months would help the county too. Potentially, just from the funding aspect of kind of what Dylan was talking about.
200
too.
applications all on day one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we gotta work with this. The other thing that we need to look at, and we looked at this a couple of years ago with Mike Babani, maybe it was just last year. It was 2021, is that we put together a cash flow analysis that we had to prepare for the PFA. And looking at those spreadsheets, I think there's, because we know up front, and it's been very clear that we would potentially have to use some CIP money to help offset some of these early maintenance expenses. So we still have that, I don't say in our back pocket, but we have that capability of having that $100,000 every year, because that went into the cash flow analysis too for on the revenue side to help offset the expenses. So whenever we decide to, whenever these dates kind of fall in place and we see what assessments come in July and what we can predict for December, which typically comes out in September timeframe. So, but I do think we need to do cash flow analysis just to see where we're going to be at and still meeting our PFA obligations and still be a little bit above water as much as possible. Because his Mike Babani's cash flow analysis did show that we were operating above the line in the early years too, but we're using that CIP money, so.
I can follow up with him as well.
What's that?
I can follow up with him.
Yeah, but it's
do
And we
that.
may want to wait until we get more definitive timeframe, but sometime I think we should.
Right, because that can change based on, if you're not being able to meet substantial and final completion dates.
So was there any other, or just kind of going back in summary, is there anything else we need to discuss or talk about as far as?
Do we need a motion on the change of the 12 months to 24 months or,
Well, that's kind of where we're at. What do we want to recommend to council?
I make a motion, we recommend the 24-month time frame.
There's a second? I'll second it.
I'm gonna get clarity, cause I thought one of them doesn't have a time limit though.
What's that?
Didn't you say that water doesn't have a time limit? The 12 months is for sewer only, not water.
Yeah, we haven't talked about water. That's gonna be a separate.
So I didn't know if we were making a motion tonight or if we were waiting till next time to get all the clarification to make a motion.
Yeah, that's a
Water
good
and
point.
sewer
We
should
should
be in
do.
alignment.
Cause exactly, that's why I thought those were together.
No, you're. I thought so too, so I started looking at it, but crap.
We got
So,
5 years to hook up water and 2 for sewer.
no, I agree. It needs to be the same because a lot of people are sewer and water at the same time.
Exactly, do it at the same time, it's more cost effective. You're not gonna wanna have two contractors come out 2 different times to get 2 bills. Yes.
Would you want to withdraw your motion?
Well, okay. I think eventually we're gonna wanna do that, but what you're saying is that we need to get something in place for the water hookups before we can.
I think what we're saying is, if it's true, we need to add something about the water,
Yeah,
then we do both of them at the same time. And equal the same period.
I would change it to that we do it so they both coincide or coordinated so that one contractor can do both the projects at the same time.
I would say there's a consensus to do that at the same
Yeah.
time.
I mean,
So that may require an ordinance change,
Right.
right? Which is a
Public
little bit more involved than just a recommendation to council.
So the earliest we could do anything is at the March meeting. Or having a public hearing. Prior to the 21st or. March 21st. Well. I guess I think it'd be better to withdraw the motion because
Okay.
I just looked at this one paragraph and saw. She her comments, we need to read, sure we're not missing something here, so.
I'll withdraw my motion on this, but the stipulation that we bring it up again next month. And see if we can get that, if it takes ordinance change, then that's gotta be done.
Yes.
And then
I withdraw my
at the
second.
time we get the ordinance change in there, then have worded to the 24 months instead of the 12 months, and then I think that would be the right way to go.
And I'm guessing that 24-month. Kind of kicks off at substantial completion as soon as. And based on whatever the city actually says, today is the day we're providing collection and treatment services.
Well, that's, Joe, you want to talk to that point because it's 2 different dates. It's another date out there.
Yeah, I think that
We can't hear you, Joe.
the dates will be a little bit different. For example, the water service for some areas of town could be fairly early this spring. The gravity sewer for most all residents that require private connections would still be late this fall. So
Yes, we'll want to be,
there are a few different dates.
not
Ranges
force
there.
people to put in water service before sewer's ready.
Well, we have 20 people that are just getting water only, no sewer, 12 overall in Forest View.
21.
A small number up behind Tilly's that are just getting water and no sewer, so.
Are they part of the development where it's already,
Was that?
are they part of a development where it's already?
Yeah, it's the line that comes down Lake Shady from. And takes in, where that blue line is behind Tilly's from 12th Street north up to 7th Street.
So they're getting water service, but no sewer. But the folks in the map right next to you are getting probably both, right? Those folks are probably getting both for the most part. And so water will be available first. But we're not gonna wanna put them in a spot where they have to trench in their water line, but sewer's not ready yet.
Right, that's why we're looking at the
Yeah,
same date.
yeah. Yeah, so it'd probably be
There,
best.
there are very few property owners that are getting both sewer and water service. That aren't getting low pressure sewer, you know, the low pressure sewer is being constructed as part of the project, and so those folks will really just have to extend the water services, so there aren't many people that are getting water and gravity sewer. In fact, very, very few.
South of the river.
Maybe a handful.
And so I won't claim to understand how you set those dates and how they're written into ordinance, but. You know, that. People in different situations. And the clock is gonna. Potentially run differently.
The ordinance for sewer reads. Shall be connected to the city sewer system within 1 year after connection to an operational sewer system becomes available. Unless in the judgment of the city engineer, making such a connection is impractical based on specific location of the building and the location of the connection point to the sewer system. Property owners failing to connect, that's a penalty, okay. So it's just really that operational sewer system is. Because right now, the way the schedule is, Joe, I think this substantial completion of the project is May of 2024. Or is that the end of October date? Sustainable connection, I guess, is end of October.
Yeah, the substantial completion for the sewer and water improvements, I believe, is, you know, end of October 23, and then the final completion date for the project carries over into 2024, but that has more to do with, you know, turf restoration and punch list work and different things like that, so.
So because of the motor controls, it could be, potentially could be the end of the year in December, which is. May or may not happen, depending on the weather. This year, they could have done it probably. Connected the three big developments. But. Okay, so. We need to do some work from city staff to look at that.
And if we stretch it out to 2 years, it probably covers all those situations fine, so.
All right, any other comments there? If not, then we just, the next item is our. And I think we pretty much identified that working with a contract is, and getting the commissioning is in limbo. But we know it's gonna be, won't be in June or July. Probably be that October date or. And obviously we'll be watching that from month to month, and have you reached out to the 2 or 3 companies and just given them some preliminary dates?
I have 2 sample RFPs. I'm waiting on a third so that I can integrate that and then tailor it with Joe's help, tailor it to be for our facility. I'd like to get that out before month end, so that we can start getting some responses back and do some interviews, qualifications and such.
Okay.
So, sooner the better.
Yeah.
Cause some of them may need to hire staff themselves, so but that's.
Or relocate or whatever, so.
Right,
No, I would like to offer a suggestion, and this is, because Dylan is a maintenance supervisor at the Rochester treatment plant.
Okay.
So I'd like.
You can't have our operators.
What's that?
You can't steal our operators.
oh, well, okay, note to
Okay, we
self.
can't steal them, but we should ask them.
So,
But I'd like to have Dylan and also Joe take a look at the review too, so we're going where we're at, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kane is what I meant to say.
Oh. Okay.
So we're all marching to the same page. All right, anything else? Otherwise, we'll just seek a motion to close.
I'll make the motion. Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Right.
8-11, thank you very much. Good meeting.
Good night.
Right.
yeah.
Hope you feel better,
That's one
Joe.
handling going up front.
Thank you.
Thanks, whoever, for the folks that participated in that, meeting with all those county folks.
Second.
Thank you. That was,
The
That's good news.
residents will
Yeah.
actually appreciate that.